Get ready for your sim racing horoscope because I'm going to tell you what your iRating says about your driving. On a more serious note though, I wanted to go over today what I see the most common issues are for people of certain iRating brackets. I see a lot of different types of driving and different skill levels through my coaching, so I thought I would compile all the lessons that I teach levels 0 iRating all the way up to 5K, 6K iRating, and talk about what each group struggles the most on and what would get them to that next level. And quick disclaimer, the skill levels that I present via iRatings are more of like what I expect somebody whose equilibrium is at this level. Everyone's different. You could be at a certain iRating and have a different skill to somebody. So don't take this with too much seriousness because I'm just trying to give a broad idea of what people of different skill groups need to work on to get to the next level. So first up is the 0 to 1000 iRating skill group. You will see most of these people finishing in the bottom splits around average or below in bottom splits. So what is something that they need to work on? The most common thread that I see between all sub 1000 iRacing drivers just about is general car control. And this can go one of two ways. The first way it can go is somebody is not able to control their car. They'll be spinning out all over the place. They won't be ever tracking out to the wall because they're afraid of hitting it. They'll just be generally kind of just all over the place on the track, and that is when you will see somebody dip below that starting iRating threshold. But that's not the only way that happens. The other common way that I see this happen is somebody is overly safe on the track, and you could say, oh, well, they're just trying to be a safe driver and learn the ropes, and that's completely true, and I like when people take this approach to learning the game. But at the same time, a big reason that people will fall under 1000 iRating is because they just are not pushing hard enough. So what is something that I would recommend for people struggling into the 0 to 1000 iRating range? I see very commonly with people who are under 1000 iRating that they are not very comfortable with being anywhere on their throttle besides 0% or 100%. And for those who are struggling bringing the car up to speed and being comfortable with it, that is really what single car practice is for. I can't recommend enough for this group to just practice and fail over and over again until you start figuring things out. Failure in sim racing is a huge part of figuring it out at any level, and I think that if you are afraid to do any sort of failure, it is a lot harder to get faster. So hit those walls in practice, spin out if you have to, especially if you are used to just underdriving the car and getting it around the track. It is only through those failures where you will truly understand car control and start bringing up your overall level. On to the 1000 to 2000 range, this is where I see pretty much the bulk of people on iRacing. You see a huge bump in the bell curve here, and this is where generally people are more comfortable with the car. They're able to get it around the track without hitting the wall very much. They're able to put down consistent lap times, they just won't quite be up to speed. You'll see these drivers anywhere in the middle splits, kind of finishing anywhere, but usually averaging in the middle of the field so that they're not really going up, but they're not really going down. This group of drivers is like the first group from the 0 to 1000, but you have to take it up a notch a little bit from there. So there are two types of drivers mainly, the type who are getting good at car control, but they are just afraid to push their car any further. And then you will get the group who are starting to find that limit, but are just not able to put together full races and then have a lot of results towards the back of the pack as a result. This iRating is where it becomes very important to start finding the limit of your car because you will not progress much further on just consistency alone. And this is going to be a lot of the same as last time. How do we find the limit? Well, we go to practice and we crash and we hit the wall and we spin out and we fail over and over again until we can dial it back into something that is actually fast. And while most people in this group are able to find that partial throttle, that trail braking type of pedal input, they aren't necessarily smooth with it. And smoothing out these inputs at the right times is what's going to be another factor of getting you to that next level. If you're used to driving conservatively around this range, you might actually see a dip at first in your iRating as you start approaching this limit because you will start making more mistakes in race. But that is not a bad thing in the long term. That is a good thing in the long term because you will be getting practice and knowing what it's like to drive closer to that limit. And then as you get more used to it, your ceiling will be raised. Notice how I have not talked about tire saving it and we're all the way up to 2000 iRating. Why is that? Well, personally, I believe that if you're able to find the limit, then you will bypass everybody's tire saving abilities at that level, because I think that the tire saving that happens in that 1 to 2000 iRating range is mostly just strict under driving that mathematically doesn't work out versus somebody who is able to find the line that the car can perform the best on over the course of the run. All right, now we are on the 2000 to 3000 iRating range, and there are a couple of types of people in this range. The first is going to be kind of what I talked about earlier, the people who are very safe drivers, very consistent, will always pull out around a top 7, top 10 in a either high second split or a low top split type of deal, but they will never show that race winning speed. And then the second type of person is going to be somebody who is starting to get really, really fast, but is also extremely inconsistent and cannot save tires to save their life. This 2000 to 3000 range is where we really start implementing trail braking. A lot of people in the 1000 to 2000 range will run tracks without any brake just because they can. People starting to get into the 2000s up to 3000 start to understand that maybe a little bit of brake will help the rest of the corner. And starting to use that technique and some of the other techniques that we talked about earlier, snowballing those together, we finally start to see some people driving on that limit I was talking about. You can get some very, very fast 2 to 3K drivers who are able to put down lap times that could rival with almost anybody on the service. But the one overarching idea that a lot of these drivers do not understand yet at this point and need to in order to push to the next level is that not all limits are equal. In the process of finding the limit, a lot of these really fast 2 to 3000 iRating drivers found a limit that involves them over driving corner entry. And because they are used to doing that, they find this extreme limit that puts the car on its right front or on the wrong tire for the entire corner and therefore burning it up. It's very, very common in this range. But even then, they can hone in their skills even further. They can disregard anything that has to do with tires, and they can still push through that 3000 mark just by getting more and more comfortable with driving the car on the absolute edge. This is possible, and I've seen it done many times. But the equilibrium point of this type of driver is barely over 3K in my opinion. Going back to the conservative type driver, they will have to start bringing their risk and feeling tolerance up a little bit in order to get to that next level. Feeling the car driving on the edge can be scary for a lot of people, but at the same time, it is what is necessary to get to a very high iRating type skill level. Again, for this type of driver, I would recommend a lot of practice of putting yourself in situations that make you uncomfortable so that you know what wheel inputs you need to do to get everything back to normal. So it's just having that knowledge to where you do not have to react to things that happen because you already know what's going to happen by seeing the future in a way. All right, we're getting just about to the 3,000 to 4,000 skill level group here, and we'll see a lot of those conservative type drivers start peter off right here because you need a certain level of aggression to reach this level in the first place. So we're gonna be focusing more on the type of driver who is overdriving the car, because a lot of people stuck in that 3,000 to 4,000 range have the speed to outrun pretty much any 1K, any 2K, but there is just something that they are missing on those race runs that are not allowing them to finish with or ahead of these higher level drivers. The issue that a lot of people are plagued with around this skill level of 3,000 to 4,000 iRating is driving the car too hard, because they find the limit, they're able to find the limit, but the vast majority of the time when somebody discovers how to find a limit, they find it by driving too deep into a corner and then driving the car on edge because of that. Well, in a lot of iRacing cars, this will cause a lot of extra tire heat and tire wear. So there is something that we have to kind of roll back a bit in order to keep moving forward. And this mindset shift that I'm talking about is what is our goal and what limit are we trying to find? So instead of the limit being how deep can I enter the corner and still have a good corner exit, we should be thinking about the limit of how early can I get on the throttle and still hold it and raise it at the right time for the exit of the corner. If we shift those goals, we start to get something that looks a lot more like tire saving, but also maintaining a high level of speed. Around the 3,000 to 4,000 range, people start figuring out that trail braking is necessary at almost every single oval track for NASCAR. Pretty much everything except for Michigan, and even at Michigan, you want to do it at the latter half of a run. So this is a combination of earlier entries, earlier throttle, and in certain cars, a big concept that you've heard me talk about a lot on this channel, getting the car on the right rear. Now this isn't something on every single setup. It's very common in ARCA. You'll see it sometimes in Xfinity, sometimes in trucks, but what it is you want the car to get loose to get the car off of the tire that wants to wear the most. So this actually goes both ways. It's not just get the car on the right rear to save your right front. If you have a car that wants to wear your right rear, you want to get the car on the right front. So it's pretty much just balancing the load and heat of tires. So people around this skill level will start understanding what is needed in a car to achieve this. So what are the techniques very important for somebody to progress out of this skill level? I would say it's going to be trail braking. I think it's going to be mid-corner throttle control, and then doing whatever is possible to get on the throttle as early as possible. A 4,000 to 5,000 iRating driver is really starting to understand a lot of these concepts. Not all of them are really good at tire saving. There are some people who on speed alone are able to squeak out good finishes because they are just very good at finding their line and sticking to it and executing it at a high level. But they don't necessarily have this tire saving skill that can get them to win races consistently. They might need to be bailed out by a caution, they might start on the pole and then drop a couple spots pretty consistently, but they're still finishing very well and are definitely blowing a lot of the lower level drivers out of the water by this point. But if you are completely stuck in the 4,000 to 5,000 range, what do I recommend? Well, first off, I recommend really trying to get into the nitty-gritty of what it means to tire save and go fast, because that is going to be the number one thing that sees you improve your race runs. And if you're a person who really kind of starts to understand this but doesn't qualify as well, then that might be where you need to start going into the lab, figuring out what people are doing for qualifying, and really starting to figure out how to push the car to the absolute limit, if only it be for one lap. And finally, the 5K to 6K driver. I think that once you hit 5K, you realize almost everything that you need to do, but then you realize how tough it is. Because at the end of the day, the people who are at the very top in terms of skill level, regardless of iRating, are not putting a wheel wrong for the entire race. They are looking at all of these things that we talked about, down from the 0K up to the 5K skill level, and they're doing all of those things without putting one wheel wrong, and that is what gets them their overall advantage. Because there are certain times in races where you might slip a rear tire and heat it up, and you will just be incapable of putting down good lap times after that because you are at a heat disadvantage compared to the people around you. Or sometimes you will miss a corner entry and have to turn your wheel a little more, and now you're at a right front disadvantage. So this level, around the 5,000 to 6,000 iRating, is where you really learn how much more there is. Because now that you know everything, now it's time to be perfect. You can get to 5,000 iRating with decent to fair execution, but you need to get great to perfect execution to get to that pro level. But where do you guys fall along this? And did I read your horoscope right? Anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.